Hello, and welcome to Retrospective Cinema, a podcast wherein we'll endeavor week after week to see the full filmographies of chosen directors. We'll interpret, critique, and discuss. I'm your co-host, Ryan Saylor.
And I am your other co-host, Annie Morell. And this week, we reach a real behemoth in Fellini's La Dolce Vita. We're going to discuss it. Here's a clip.
Qualche volta la notte, questa oscurità, questo silenzio mi pesano. È la pace che mi fa paura. Temo la pace più di ogni altra cosa. Mi sembra che sia soltanto un'apparenza e che nasconda l'inferno. Pensa a cosa vedranno i miei figli domani. Il mondo sarà meraviglioso, dicono.
That was once again from Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, or The Sweet Life, or The Good Life, if you're nasty. Wow. This was 3 hours, and I told Ryan before recording I finished the last hour just before this. This is one that I genuinely don't know until we discuss it, whether I'm going to recommend it or not.
Okay.
And I know that that's maybe a wild thing to say because this is so universally beloved, like it's considered one of his masterpieces, but that's where I'm at with it. And it is maybe one that I should have given myself more time to process. But yeah, where are you at?
Anytime I dive into something with universal acclaim, like you're saying, I don't know what to expect. You know, that can go all the way from, I don't know, Roman Holiday, where it's very accessible, like to the point that it's universally loved because there's no one on the planet that wouldn't be into that movie, all the way to something like Stalker by Tarkovsky is universally loved, but then you sit down with it and you're like, wow, I've been watching a minecart go along a train for 8 minutes. I don't know who recommended this to me, but I mean, I brilliant film, you know, don't want to be misconstrued, but when there is something this loved, it is a spectrum. Absolutely. This is much further on the inaccessible side of that spectrum.
Yeah.
There's so much going on here, and there's a million places we could start. I think I would like to just begin by acknowledging kind of what I think is metatextually happening in the film, because I think that helps me understand a little bit of the grandiosity of it all and what the point of this is.
Okay.
Up front, we are a full spoiler podcast. I'll get that out of the way.
Also worth noting, it's not going to be throughout by any means, but there is some suicidal ideation and actual suicide discussed in this film, and we'll let you know when we actually get to that, because it's very discrete parts of it, but it is important in case that affects you.
I think this is one of those films, and source nothing. Like, this is just me interacting with it. I think this is one of those films where the director is having a crisis. I think he is realizing at this point in his career that, we talked about it last week. Nights of Cabiria was everything. It was everything he'd made so far rolled into one film. And where do you go from there? And I think he was feeling confined by Italian neorealism. I mean, we get a shout out in the movie being like, do you think Italian neorealism is dead or alive? That gets yelled at one point.
Yeah, I know. I freaked out.
I think he's wanting to lean into dreamier stuff. And so I think he makes this movie, and if you remove all of this, it's still incredible. But I think what's going on between the lines is you have Fellini wrestling with what he's been and what he wants to be as an artist. And we see those both conflicting and meshing very intentionally throughout the film. There's a whole video essay by Kogonada on one shot from the film because it means that much to him. But I get it. There's a shot in the middle of the film where you're being welcomed. Well, I say you. Marcello is being welcomed to the party at the Steiner's house by Steiner's wife. And she's looking directly at the camera. It's a POV shot. And the camera pushes in, and we start by seeing Steiner, and then indiscernibly, the camera moves, and suddenly Marcello's in the shot, and the camera is still there. The shot has not broken, but the camera, the audience, is no longer Marcello when a moment ago they were. And that shot is absurd, first of all. I feel like you still don't see something like that in modern film. But Kogonada makes the claim that the film is itself wrestling to be freed. And I think that's fair. I think we see this film struggle against itself in a good way. I don't want to, say that anything that makes that sound like a negative. But I think the film is conflicting identities and finding, by the end of the film, and I think it does. I think the final moments are Fellini finding what he wants to be going forward.
Yeah, I wonder if some of it, if any of it, because this is the first time, I mean, we've got a couple of his films that don't feature his wife. Not to bring up Giulietta Messina in a movie discussion that does not have her in it, but I'm going to do it. This same year, the movie The High Life comes out, and it totally flops. And that kind of sends her into hiding for a while, and she kind of focuses on her family and doesn't act for a long time. And I wonder if there's an element of like not having your creative partner there. Again, like you said, source nothing. But I'm imagining a world where like she's off filming this movie while he's working on this behemoth, which I'm sure took all of his time.
5 months.
And feeling like a bit lost without that. Do you think that Marcello is a Fellini stand-in? Like we talked about that with Eva Deloni.
I think there are moments, absolutely, where Fellini is expressing himself through that character. I think overall, I'm going to say no. Ultimately, Marcello is this like means to explore all of these different realities of the time. And I think that overpowers Fellini processing his own emotions and in the way a stand-in character would, but I think there are elements of Fellini in him.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think the biggest piece of evidence that we have that this is not a Fellini stand-in is the fact that he is a constant philanderer, which is not Fellini's reputation, at least posthumously. We should talk about the intro.
The prologue, yeah, it's so good.
Incredibly striking. I was like, oh, I'm watching a blockbuster right now.
Yeah.
There's a helicopter.
Yeah, well, I mean, that honestly, that is part of, I think, intentionally the opening is Fellini suddenly has seemingly infinite money compared to his previous films.
I couldn't help but think of Magnolia for many reasons with this. Just, I mean, there's a lot of plot going on, a lot of characters, and then, it's coming off of a big success where he has a lot more financial backing to kind of do whatever he wants, which is what Paul Thomas Anderson did with Magnolia.
Yeah, a couple interesting things from that opening. So, I mean, what is actually happening is this helicopter has a statue of Christ that they're taking to the Vatican. There's another helicopter following, which has Marcello and his crew, because he's a journalist. I don't know if that probably hasn't even come up yet. World's worst journalist? I think that's actually a key element of the film, is that we only ever see him sit down to write once, and he doesn't at the time. Like, he says he's a journalist, but we don't ever actually see that.
We hear about his writing at the very end. We hear about specific things that he wrote about when he's sold out. Spoiler alert. He's complimented enough on him, on the fact that he's an intellectual. We get some of his friends who know him are like, you should write your novel or whatever. Like, do that. It's so good. So I do feel like there's textual evidence that he is a good writer, but I think he probably phones it in when it's not something he cares about.
It's like a shell or an artifice. By the end of this film, we have a full portrait of this man, I'd say. And I don't think any of that portrait includes his writing.
Other than the fact that it gets him a lot of money because he's a shill, essentially.
So the big moment in this prologue that kind of sets up this dichotomy that shows up throughout the film, they're following the statue of Christ to the Vatican. Obviously, those are massive historical things and spiritual and, elevated, religious, whatever you want to say. And then they stop, again, in a helicopter to try to pick up some girls.
But they can't hear because it's a helicopter.
So, there's both the dichotomy of the elevated and the, the immediate or the low, which we don't quite realize how low it is yet because we don't know at this point that Marcello's engaged. There's also this questioning of, I think, Italy as a whole, of its past, its historical relevance, and then the very modern stuff. And I think we get that a lot in this film.
Maybe this is what you were literally just saying, but it's like religious piety versus new age sexiness. There are a few photographers, but one of them is named Paparazzo. And I, for the whole film, thought that the term already existed in this time, and that
that he was named for that. No.
well, that people were just calling all the guys like, oh, paparazzo, like get out of the way.
No.
Paparazzo is singular for paparazzi, but it literally is how the term was coined. I learned after the fact. I was reading something and it was like, his friend paparazzo, and I was like, that was his name? That was his name?
There's that. There's I mean, even just the term, which it's a borrowed term at this point, but like the sweet life, that wasn't a thing. This film originated that.
That makes sense. And I think, even though the term is being coined before our eyes in the film, I do think that he has a lot of commentary on what is already a pretty vicious culture of media sensationalizing very personal things, very tragic things. That happens throughout, so I'm sure we'll get to it. But that was wild to me. Already, yeah, this is an important film for that alone, because it's such a huge part of the world's culture, and specifically American culture, which this has so many languages in it too. There's so many.
And none of them line up on the list.
Okay. The dubbing, this is one of the reasons why I was not sure whether to recommend this, because I do think the dubbing is at its most atrocious so far in this film.
We have reached the full, like, there's no longer any chance that it was we need to do another take or whatever. It's just Fellini liked to write until the editing room, and
not a fan. I do think that's a knock against him. Probably the biggest knock against him as an artist to me, because I think it's so distracting.
It sure is a choice.
It's a lazy choice. I'll say it.
I don't think it's laziness. I think it's perfectionist. Yeah. In a way that is detrimental, unfortunately.
Counterintuitive to the goal.
Yeah, it is so interesting because, I mean, his frames are perfect. There are shots upon shots in this film that are just, you have to see it. It's just magnificent. And then you're looking at it just in awe. And then you have the American dubbing of Godzilla meme going on, just in the middle of the frame. And it's like, oh no, why? It's
not good. It really genuinely took me out of it quite a lot, especially because there are English speakers in this. So I can't imagine, if you're an Italian speaker watching his others that have pretty bad dubbing. I guess I'm glad I don't speak Italian. Because I'm too focused enough on the subtitles that I don't look at their lips. It's bad. If I could go back in time, I would try to convince Fellini to leave his wife and also stop the dubbing.
For you, if you've just joined us on this episode, Annie has a crush, not that she hates Mary.
Yes, So she can be with me, is the implication. This is a running joke, and it's only mostly a joke.
A callback. So this film is continually alternating between night and day. And sometimes that signals a new vignette, sometimes it doesn't. The vignette signals are mostly, I guess I should say, because there are a couple exceptions, but mostly very clear. Fade to black, pop back in to the next one. We start first vignette, our first episode at night. Marcello meets this woman, Madalena? Okay. Anyway, she is tired of everything. She's tired of Rome. She's tired of talking. All she wants to do in the world is make love.
Yeah.
And it's simultaneously kind of fun to watch, but also it only works because this is like a free spirit, attractive person at a club. Like, this would be an insufferable person if you actually talk to her for any longer amount of time.
That pretty privilege, yeah. Yeah, and then they meet a lady he knows who is a sex worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go have sex in her bed.
No.
That was crazy.
And she's fine with it, though.
This is where I didn't realize this was going to be, a billion plots and half of this man's life. But I was like, because there's a scene, they're in her bedroom, they've like closed the door and she realizes what's happening. And then she goes outside and is like talking to these men, like scheming about something. So I was like, okay, what does she want from these people? Like, how's she going to get it? And then nothing comes of that. Absolutely nothing comes of that.
Yeah, different episodes are more thematically important or more self-contained. Anyway, this one seems to mostly just serve to introduce Maddalena and the fact that Marcello cheats and that he is dissatisfied with, it seems like he has kind of everything going on, but he's looking for fulfillment in all kinds of things. But yeah, overall, this one it's like good to watch. And yeah, you're right. While I was watching it, I was like, okay, this is setting up the plot, but it does not.
It does not at all. Yeah, her house is flooding. That didn't really matter, but it does. It's another nod to the class disparity still happening in Italy at this time.
Well, actually, yeah, now that you say that, I mean, I didn't even think about it till right now, but with my earlier claims, this segment of the film is the most neorealist of the film. And then this is right before we get them talking about like, oh, is neorealism dead? Because that's in the next episode.
Yeah, because the rest of it is so grand and superficial. Yeah, it's a lot of rich people doing a lot of stuff that doesn't really matter, mostly partying. This is part 2 of me complaining about how this movie looks and sounds. Looks great, except for every single scene in a car. And I understand that this is not unique to Fellini.
Yeah, you gotta excuse
and
that.
And I will. I understand the effects were not what they are today, but I do believe that acting could have been a little more convincing. I do not think she was driving that car.
The big thing with any scene with rear projection, this also comes up even in this movie when he's at the top of the tower with the actress and they look out at the town. But any movie using rear projection at this time was being shown in a quality that matched the projectors in the movie. So that would have looked better. But as you restore the movie, and I mean, now when we watch it, it's crystal clear. We watch it in better quality than they would have had at the time, hands down. But they can only restore the backgrounds to their full image, which is the projectors of the time. So, yeah. So that's just what, I mean, that's a consequence of watching in the modern age.
Again, I'm not even talking about the projections. That's part of it for sure.
Oh, you're just saying her little wiggles on the steering wheel?
Her wiggles on the steering wheel, the level to which the car is moving around.
Yeah, it is a bumpy road.
These are practical effects. That's all I'm saying. On the subject of a car, did you notice when they're in this car, Marcello and Maddalena, that there's like, Nino Rota's beautiful score. Beautiful, beautiful score for this. I loved it. And I think he says like, turn off the music. And then he turns off the music and it turns off the score. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's never been done before.
In the history of cinema, 1960. Where at the same time as Breathless is coming out the same year, so like he wouldn't have seen it. But yeah, I you can feel that same feeling the French were having, where they're like, let's just try new things and like let's break the artifice as much as possible.
Yeah, so we meet Maddalena, we get to know their relationship, and then he returns home. Content warning number 1.
The first of those.
Emma, his fiance, has overdosed, has tried to kill herself via overdose. And it's pretty clear that it's literally because of his cheating, which
is the first of those times where we get the contrast between night and day, where things look really great at night, and then the film goes to the next day, and things do not look nearly as good. Yeah.
It gets a lot more real, and then he takes her to the ER, and she survives. But then he's like literally already trying to phone his mistress again while he's at the hospital. So we don't like it. And then he gets the next kind of vignette, chapter, whatever you want to call it, has a lot to do with this Swedish American actress named Sylvia, who is like a Swedish Marilyn Monroe is how I interpreted her. And I'll be the one to say it. She has gigantic boobs. And it's both very important and not at all important. But people it's like they're gravity defying. It was impressive. That dress was supportive. But yes, he is supposed to be chaperoning her for the day and kind of, I guess, also protecting her from the other
Emma's
reporters.
Still in recovery. She's taking medication after her hospitalization, and he's on the phone with her, and she's like, just promise me you guys won't be alone.
And he is alone with her.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the second she says that, you know it's going to happen. And he goes out of his way because eventually they're climbing this tower. I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit. And it's the one time we see Paparazzo not keeping up with his interest. He's like keeled over in the side of a hallway and he's like, she moves like an elevator.
The first bit of this movie is like a tour of Rome because they're at St. Peter's. That's the tower they're climbing to, like to the dome of St. Peter. They, a little bit later, go to this alfresco dance dinner party that's also a famous landmark. It's like these ruins called the Baths of Caracalla. I don't know Italian, but yeah, it's like an ancient bathhouse that is now ruins, and it's a sick party venue, I have to say. And this is skipping ahead again.
They play rock and roll.
They play rock and roll. Yeah, I was like, ooh, Elvis. Elvis has made his way to Italy. And then they're in the Trevi Fountain.
Yes.
At the end of this chapter. So yeah, it's just like a lot of major Italian landmarks are featured in this.
And each time that thing that I was talking about is happening. Like you have St. Peter's Tower, but we have paparazzi and American actress, running up it. Mm-hmm. And we have those baths, but yeah, rock and roll's being played at it. And we have the fountain, but again, we have like the modern celebrities and they're swimming in it. And so yeah, there is this contrast between the old Italy and the new Italy that I think is very much being debated here. But anyway, I was saying, he's running up these stairs. He sees the paparazzo has, keeled over, and he's like, oh,
my chance.
I get a chance to be alone with this actress. Yeah, like the one thing he's been told not to do, and he has to go out of his way to make it happen, and he still does.
And then the only reason that they don't kiss, like they're about to kiss, and then they get interrupted. Yeah, he's a scumbag. That was another thing that I really struggled with throughout this, because he is the one who is stitching all of these vignettes together, and he is such a terrible person. That's something I always struggle with in media. The reason why it took me so long to get into Mad Men and Game of Thrones, because I was like, all of these characters are terrible people. Why do I want to be watching this? And not like terrible in a fun way. Mm-hmm. He sucks, and he never gets better or even tries.
I think that is actually one of the things that is to the runtime's credit, because that did pop up in my mind a lot while watching the film. Was like, why is this one so long? Especially compared to Fellini's first 6 films. None of them even crossed 2 hours. This one's almost 3. But I think the length does really help to make you feel worn out by this. Mm-hmm. Like the glamour does go away eventually when you're just there this whole time with this horrible person. And I think a shorter version of this film would... I mean, the film still does, show the appeal, but I think a shorter version would be less effective at making the audience say, like, wow, I don't want to live like that.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yes.
And I agree. It's intentionally exhausting. And I think we get like a micro version of that in his scenes with this Swedish actress, with Sylvia, because he's enamored with her. She's this gorgeous, famous woman. And very quickly, she's a weird lady. She hears dogs howling, and she howls back with them. She finds a random kitten. He's like, there are 1 million kittens on the street in Italy. Girl, put it down. She's like, get me some milk. He does. He's like, okay, I'll do it if it means I maybe get laid. And gets her a tall glass of milk. By then, she's like, put the kitten down, and that's when she gets into the Trevi Fountain. Mm-hmm. And you can see him just being like, oh my God, this is such a hassle.
They are all things also that feel Manic Pixie-esque.
Yes!
They could have been presented more charmingly, but the film does not.
No, she sucks. It's a very vapid caricature of this lady. I think it's our most obvious and quick transition from night to day while they're in this fountain.
Oh, it's so good.
Because, yeah, she kind of anoints him with the water, and then he, like, looks up and it's daytime. It's, like, that quick.
Yeah.
Even if I don't end up recommending this film, which... I still don't know. It's still a great film with a lot of cool innovation.
There are these magical realism things throughout that, get more and more until the ending, which excited to even interpret that live with you. But our first major one is right here where, yeah, she tells him, get in this water, and then hours pass in an instant. That's neat. And suddenly, once again, now that it is suddenly dawn, everything is a little lamer to him. And he's like surrounded kind of by people, and he's just in this fountain getting wet. And then from there, they go back and meet her husband, fiance, something, who beats her and beats him. And
Yeah.
it's a mess.
It's bad. And then we move on to our first of 3 Steiner encounters. Marcello's friend, who's this intellectual who he clearly deeply admires. They go into this church and he's like, hey, can I play the organ? Steiner. And then he plays the most sinister Bach piece that is so iconic, like everybody knows it. Do you know the title of the da-da-da?
Oh,
Da-da-da-da-da.
yeah. Is that Fugue in G? I mean, they're all named like that.
Yeah, that's why I don't know the title.
One sec. Yes, Toccata and Fugue in D minor.
Sure, he plays that, which we all know it. We all love it. He's ripping it up, not playing that organ at all. They sure did dub the organ playing too.
Yeah, that one, I mean, that's in a lot of movies,
yeah.
so I can't even really blame Fellini, but yeah, it's always distracting.
I think the equivalent would be, like, if it was dubbed in the same way the speech was dubbed, it'd be him just, like, indiscriminately slapping the keys, and then this beautiful piece of music comes out.
It would be him playing, like, a harp, and then that sound's coming out of it, So, yeah, when Andy talks about the first of 3, so common structural analysis of the film separates it into 7 parts with a prologue, an intermezzo, and epilogue surrounding those. The big problem with that, and the reason this has pushback, is one of those parts is split up throughout the film, and none of the others are. So that part that's split up is right here. You get the 3 Steiner sequences. And the first one feels relatively minor at the time. I would have not guessed in the viewing that it was going to lead to the climax of the film.
I thought we weren't going to see this guy again. Or he was going to be a villain of some kind because of the Bach piece.
Well, he starts with some jazz, which I thought was another good, here's modern with the ancient. Mm-hmm. But then, he switches to Bach.
Then we move on to, he's back with his fiancée, Emma. He is on a different assignment, and this time it's this supposed religious miracle. These 2 children purport to have seen the Madonna under this tree. And so he's shown up. A bunch of people are there, a bunch of people who are in trouble in some way, looking for salvation from this ostensible sighting. And Emma tracks him down and finds him at this sequence. I think it's the other kind of glimpse of neorealism that we get, the other main glimpse, because it's a lot of poorer people and just like sickly people who are there, kind of similar to if you listen to our Nights of Cabiria episode or have seen that movie, when they go to see the Madonna. It's these just desperate people who have no agency in their lives and are trying to ask for change in that. And they kind of this mob sort of forms because the children aren't there initially. And it's literally just like that they're surrounding the tree where the kids supposedly saw the Madonna. And then when the kids arrive, this mob is just blindly following these kids as they go, oh, she's over there. Oh, she's over there. It's so clearly just like kids being kids. Like, I don't blame them, and they're getting attention. So they're like, yeah, we're seeing her, is how I interpreted it, at least.
I thought it was a little more sinister.
Ooh, okay.
I had that interpretation until the very end of the sequence, because right at the end, the dad's like talking to the interviewers on behalf of the kids. And he's like, they said that the Virgin Mary said we need to build a church here, and that's why she won't talk to you. And so I'm wondering if he put them up to this to just get a building next to him.
Wow. A church, though? Like, he's just like, I have less of a commute to church, or...
Yeah, that is fair. I don't know why he just specifically wants, but maybe he wants a new nice building. I mean, Catholic churches are beautiful.
It's like early gentrifying of the neighborhood. And then when he says that, they all kind of descend on the tree and start taking pieces of the tree. I thought to make room for the church, but I think it could also be they're like taking them as like talismans almost. And instead of anyone getting healed in the heat of this mob, a kid gets trampled to death.
That's gnarly. I really wrestled with this sequence. I think it is probably, well, I don't know if I want to like commit, but I think it is probably my favorite of the vignettes. I think it's this really interesting wrestling of like the beauty of spirituality that I think this film does allude to a number of times, and then just how easily people can use it to corrupt and destroy. You see this whole mob of people having hope for the first time in a long time. And I do think this feels a little different than the one in Knights of Cabiria, just because there'd already been, especially that like light switch moment in the fountain. I was like, I wonder if there's going to be something showing up here, but nothing does show up. I mean, you just see such the desperation of people. I interpreted them grabbing the tree as the woman that touches the robe of Jesus in the Bible. She's like, if I could just touch even your clothes, I would be healed. And I think that's kind of what they're going for with just grabbing this tree. But yeah, the viewer can clearly tell that it's all just a lie in this case, that these kids made this up or were told to make it up. And so it's just people grabbing at nothing.
I think maybe a better comparison as far as his previous work is Il Bidone, when the scammers use, a fake priest gambit to steal poor people's money.
Sure.
Like taking advantage of people's faith for personal gain.
Which the Catholic Church condemned this film at the time, which I can get back to in a second. But besides their reading being interesting, I do think this film is actually like, maybe not pro spirituality, but it definitely alludes to a value in that is missed by society. Even that opening is like, all these people could follow Jesus, but instead they want to follow their own desires. Like, is how you would very easily read that if it was just a short film. But yeah, the Catholic Church did at the time, to my understanding, interpret the film as a parody of the second coming of Christ.
What?
Which I think is a fascinating reading of the film, for one. Like, whoever came up with that.
Drop your letterbox, Catholic Church. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so then they were just like, no, it's shameful. I think the film is, if it has any opinion on the Catholic Church, it asks the audience to care more about the real valuable stuff and less about the superfluous stuff, which I think we even do see in that scene as well. Like the one Catholic priest is like, yeah, there could be a miracle, but let's not jump to conclusions here. In all likelihood, this is like the one that is the most versed in the Bible is the only one that's like not immediately believing these kids.
Other than the brief organ scene, this is kind of the only scene with any sort of piety or religion in it, and the rest is just like debauchery. Specifically, which we'll get to it, the final faux orgy scene.
Yeah, the failed attempt at an orgy. What a scene.
Which I assume is about half of or more of attempts of all orgies.
Just some guy at a party being like, let's get it going. And everyone else is like, oh.
What if we turned off the lights and we all bang? And everyone else is like, no, let's go home.
Point them out every time. Once again, the second it's dawn, the second there's light on this is when we see that kid was trampled to death.
Ooh.
Steiner 2, Electric Boogaloo. So they go back to the house. This is actually where that shot is that I alluded to at the start of the episode, because the audience, or Marcello, or the audience, Marcello, something, is ushered in, and there's people reciting poetry and offering philosophy and playing guitar. There's the absolutely insufferable guy that's talking about the real value of women over on the East.
Oh, the Orient guy?
Yeah, it's so bad. I mean, I love how even the characters in the film are just like trying to not respond to him as he goes around the room. It's so funny.
I was so proud of Fellini because for 1 second I was like, oh no, this is when I regret saying that he was progressive. But no, yeah, he's clearly denouncing it. We get Steiner telling Marcello to follow his dreams in this scene as well, which we get a lot of people in this whole section telling Marcello, like, this is how you should live your life. This is how to be free. His dad, who shows up, tells him, oh, you should have no commitments. That's how you live a good life. Or no, that's the poet.
So that poet, Iris Tree, is this British poet, and she makes a cameo in this film playing kind of herself. Like, Marcello admires her actual poetry in the film. And then, yeah, she's just the one suddenly that is telling him to be free and available and never married and such, which is really interesting because the credits don't go long enough for her to be in the credits. She's uncredited in the film. But yeah, she seems to be playing herself and delivering this relatively bad advice, at least for this character. But this is the second time we've seen that with Fellini. Maybe even more, but we talked about that.
The actor in Knights of Cabiria.
Yes, where it's clearly someone cast to play themselves.
Like Smorge Schmooney instead of George Clooney, but then it's the...
Wow, you also watched J. Kelly this year.
I did not. You watched it.
I did. But yeah, that was Smorge Schmooney in that movie for sure.
But yes, he does that with the actor basically playing himself in Knights of Cabiria, and then again, apparently here with Iris Tree. And she tells him, don't commit to anything, don't marry, don't choose a path, just hang out, basically. And his dad, who eventually comes into the picture, is like, you should work. That's what the meaning of life is. It's like working. And then Steiner tells him, follow your dreams. And so there's all this conflicting advice. And he's, at this point, conflicted because he's kind of like, do I continue journalism? This is kind of soulless. Or do I commit to being more of an author, like write my own stuff that I want to write and maybe not make money, which is also like Steiner's personal struggle. Is he's torn between having the stability that a normal job would give you, which he clearly does have because it's this palatial house that he lives in, or following his dreams and living like a philosopher and maybe not having that security as much.
This is one of those scenes that I think really works with the metatextual reading of Fellini wrestling with, do I want to talk about families? Do I want to be free and, do dreams? What do I want to be as an artist going on?
Yeah, or even see it being like, yeah, do I want to focus more on my own family versus my art? Or do I want to sell out? We've talked in our past episodes so far in this series about a few times where he's struggled to get his movies made. And I'm sure that takes such a toll on a person when you just have to fight tooth and nail to get funding to do the thing that you want to do. And then the easier path that he has when people just want him to make whatever movie or
suddenly blank check.
Yeah. And then we get the intermission, the intermezzo.
Yeah. This segment,
it's horrible.
Wait, in what way?
She's like 14?
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying you just didn't like it as a scene. But yes, no, he's flirting with a minor upon minor.
No, I thought it was a fine scene.
She looks like a child. This is the one time where we get him sitting down to write, and then he just doesn't, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, he tries to write his novel, and he's like, "Stop singing, girl!" And then he notices her, and he's like, "Wait, you're hot. I'm going to talk to you and flirt with you." And she is a child, may I just say again. It's gross. And she's singing and playing Patricia, which is a song that shows up later as well. He asks her if she has a boyfriend. It's gross. That's when I was like, you are the worst. You're not going to be redeemed. This is like halfway through the movie.
There is one moment that points to that spirituality and corruptibility that I was talking about too, where, again, he's flirting with a minor, but he says oh, you look like an angel from a painting. And he mentions the artist, I forget. Clearly, whoever's, painting angels isn't thinking that they're going to have that comparison being made to do illicit flirtation years later. I think it's just, there is some corruptibility of art going on here too.
We get some Fellini special vaudevillian act in the next chapter. It's like a guy playing the trumpet
and having control over balloons.
Sound of the trumpet is like controlling these balloons. It's wacky. You said last episode that he's running out of things, and I don't think it's possible because I'm learning of new art forms every time.
You've heard of snake charming. Now get ready for balloon charming via trumpet.
Yeah, I wrote down Pied Piper, but with balloons.
Yeah, so at this point in the story, Marcello meets up with his dad, who's like, I want to go to the cha-cha club. Actually, he's like, have you heard about this club? And Marcello's like, do you want to go there? And he's like, well, if you want to. And Marcello's like, we can go there.
Now that you mentioned it.
I liked the dad until it got a little weird, but but she was into it. It seemed like, and we'll get there in a second. Anyway, but yeah, so they go to this club. Marcello introduces us and his dad to yet another woman. This is Fanny, who was one of his past flings. He told her he would put a photo of her in a magazine or something. Oh. Anyway, she's still mad about it, which is fair. I mean, he didn't follow on his part of the deal.
It's unclear if it's genuine or not, but to me, I read it as, yeah, you have wronged me, so now instead of being interested in you, I'm going to be interested in your much older father.
No, that is what she's getting out of it. It's still transactional, but she genuinely wants to make it with the dad just to get back at him, which is not a good way. Just going on the record to get back at someone.
Well, it depends on what you mean by good.
Oh,
Effective?
yeah.
Maybe. We won't know in this case because it doesn't happen, because then he kind of freaks out. Well, she comes like out of the house and she's like, something's wrong with your dad. Come help. And I guess he had like a heart attack, a stroke.
I read later that it's interpreted as a mild heart attack. I didn't know how to read it in the film because they're like, I think he drank too much.
I thought he was just super drunk. Really not super well defined, but he seems to be not well. And Marcello's like, stay here. Like, you're not doing well. Let me help you. And he's like, nope, I'm going to go to my next location. Bye. And that's the last we see of his father.
This is another of the night to dawn moments because, I mean, not that it's looking good. I guess that's a bit of the exception to that part. But yeah, everyone's drinking, having a good time. The dad's getting with this woman, whatever. It's weird, but everyone seems to be having fun. And then, yeah, just suddenly it's dawn and he's going to the hospital and it's no longer fun for anyone.
His dad doesn't seem to be a great dad.
I think once he's running away, I think there's shame. I mean, it's the next morning. He realizes both that his son has seen him attempt to cheat on their mom, because it seems like they're still together. Well, at some point, Marcello asks him, like, oh, how's mom? And he's like, oh, I brought a letter from her. So at least they're still talking. Oh. So he sees that. If it's not cheating, it's at least really weird. And then on top of it, it's someone that he used to date. So I think the dad is like, let me get out of here. I don't want to be here.
Then we get our biggest show of wealth yet. It's this like crazy wealthy aristocratic family in this big historic castle.
Yes.
With ruins, like in a small town outside of Rome. And he meets Maddalena again at this party. He runs into her. And there's this really interesting sequence where she clearly knows the house that they're in. And she's like, here, I'm going to talk to you from the other room. And it's this like echo chamber. And they have, it's a really cool visual shot. Yeah, there's like an acoustic effect where she's like way in a different room. And he's in this room that they start in. And he's like smoking alone and like listening to her talk to him without being able to see her. And she proposes to him.
As a disembodied voice.
And I think that's a really smart tactic on her part because he can't use the physical to distract her. But instead, he just tries to kind of not answer the question. He's sort of starting to open up, but he's avoiding the question. And then another guy who I guess was her date originally comes up to her and starts kissing her and touching her silently in this other room. And he's like, where'd you go, Maddalena? And I loved it because he sucks. First of all, he's already engaged. He has a fiance. What are we doing here?
I mean, it's a very effective sequence. Even just from a writing perspective or designing a scene, this would be a relatively mundane conversation, except that, she becomes this disembodied voice. And then it allows this cucking thing to happen without him knowing. So it's really interesting in a number of ways. It also starts this series of things that I don't know how to interpret, but I'll bring them to the table. This sequence is oddly spiritual. So, I mean, she becomes this literally like a god figure in this moment to him. If we didn't have the context, it is a character talking to God. He's alone in a room looking up and he's hearing this voice. And then we have, eventually the party becomes literal ghost hunting, which just gets really interesting. And there's like this woman speaking English and everything she says is a riddle. And then one time she runs into Marcello and she says like, oh, what a coincidence. And then the camera like kind of zooms in on her until she's like two dots, like her eyes are still being reflected, but otherwise everything's gone. So it's like she's seen him as a spirit or seen his soul, or again, just presenting here. And then we also get this medium thing going on. So yeah, there's a bunch of ghostly spiritual things in the sequence that I wondered if you had any reading of.
I'm not sure I do. I mean, we can put it in the context of like, this is sort of spirituality without religious rhetoric. And it kind of becomes silly when you don't have the framework behind that. I can see it being that, like specifically they're doing the seance and a couple people are laughing and a couple people are like, take this seriously. And then it turns into this kind of admission of love from this one woman to Marcello. Is that right? Doesn't really matter. But yeah, she becomes this writhing animalistic thing, supposedly possessed by this ghost. And it's just this really chaotic, kind of embarrassing moment. You just talked about the older woman disappearing. Are you talking about at the very end? Because he's trying to find someone to sleep with. There's like a different lady there who he's really trying to get with, but then he ends up getting with the older lady.
Oh, okay.
Or that's how I interpreted it.
That once like the camera's pushing in, that's him pushing in.
Yeah, like a POV of him, and they found each other in the dark, and she's like, "Oh, hello," and then we kind of cut to the next morning. So I took that, especially because this is now the third woman, and she's really into it. Like she is pursuing him, which I guess Maddalena was also pursuing him in a different way, in a way that tied him down, which is why he wasn't into it ultimately. And then it's just this cougar lady who ends up getting with him because it's clear that she doesn't want commitment, I guess. I don't know. Did you have, going back to the ghosts, did you have a different...
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's when you sit down to write a film like this and like you have all these microfilms within the larger film, maybe you're like, this short's going to lean into ghosts. Maybe that's all it is. But I do think it's interesting in a film that already has had Marcello fading in and out of existence via the camera to then include a sequence where they're ghost hunting and where, Marcello is found again. But I don't know past that even what that means necessarily.
I see a world where, because once the last act of Steiner's story happens, he is like a shell of himself. He's a ghost of his former self.
So he's like heading
like
there?
Foreshadowing for his fate, ultimately.
I like that.
Woo, we solved it.
There's no longer need to interpret La Dolce Vita. Everyone can stop.
We have the final word. 2026.
Mark it down. So then we head toward Steiner 3. This is, again, where I'm breaking down these segments, loses a little bit of logic because we start what is considered part of Steiner's story with this scene on the road where Marcello and Emma are in his car and they argue. Emma's like, I love you, but you're so far away from me and I long for when you were mine. And then like she gets out and he says, come back. And then he wants her to get out and she won't. It's just a mess. It's a whole spat.
And it's clear that neither of them is happy in this relationship anymore for different reasons, like Emma because he's a serial cheater, and Marcello at one point says it's not love, it's degradation, because she gets on him for his cheating, which I'm like, yeah, dude, then don't cheat. He's like, all you're doing is degrading me, and all I'm doing is not being faithful to you. What a complaint. Then it gets physical. She bites him, and he slaps her really, really violently, and then leaves her on the side of the road. And as these toxic relationships often do, the relationship gets reconciled. He shows up the next morning. Again, we get a transition from night to day, except nighttime they're having this terrible row, and then daytime it's almost the opposite of what you've been saying. Daytime it's like all better again, and they go back and probably make love, and they're kind of tangled up together in the sheets, and it's okay again. They've made up.
Well, I don't know. I think it fits well with what I've been saying because at nighttime, there's at least honesty. Like, we need to go our separate ways. This is horrible. And then in the daytime, I think it cleverly is doing this weird, like it looks better in the day this time. But I think we, the audience, knows it's so much worse that they're back together and having sex.
So then we get to the third and final part of Steiner's plot line. Marcello and Emma are in bed and he gets a call, and it's not clear exactly what the call is, but it's clear something bad has happened, and he ends up going over to Steiner's house, and paparazzo and the other photographers are there trying to get in, and they do successfully get in because of him, I believe, because they're not letting anyone into this crime scene, which is what it is. And at this point, this is the second time that if our content warning resonated with you, skip ahead a little bit.
Yeah, and this one's worse. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to jump.
This one is worse. So we find out if there's all these police around, and the photographers are kind of like, yeah, we heard that Steiner killed his kids and then himself. And yes, that's exactly what appears to have happened, because Marcello has a personal relationship with Steiner. And at this point, his wife is not around. They're like, okay, yeah, I want to talk to you, the detective. And it's this really stark juxtaposition of him talking to the police officer and talking about Steiner and how, no, he didn't have violent tendencies, the questions. And then you just hear in the background measurements of where the bullet came from and the distance. And it is an active crime scene. So like he's right there. And it's so bizarre because other than his eyes are open, other than the bullet hole on his temple, he kind of just looks like a guy sitting in a chair, sort of propped up still. And it's really awful. And then even more awful is the paparazzi going into this crime scene and taking pictures of not only that site, but the site of the children dead in their beds. It's heinous. And it's this, I think throughout we've had points where people, celebrities and just people of interest that the photographers are taking photos of have begged them, please don't put this in the papers. Like, please let me have this personal moment. There are all these appeals to them. And of course, these people can't appeal to them, these children. And it's the worst version of media, this kind of sensationalizing of this horrible crime. Like, that does not need to be published. Those images do not need to be published, but they obviously are going to be.
There's a really interesting line. The policeman is asking Marcello, like, why do you think he would have done this or something like that? Because Marcello at first is like, no idea. And I think he still is like that at the end. But he does say, maybe he was scared of us. And yeah, I think that's so fascinating that the film, I mean, we've removed the artifice time and time again in this film. Like, none of the glory's there anymore. All of the glamour looks disgusting. No one's happy. But yeah, it's this moment where for a second it hits Marcello that the way he's living and the way the people around him live is so awful. The only thing he could think of that would drive his friend to do this is by looking around him and seeing what they've become, which is a horrible thought and very sobering. The other moment in this scene that is so brilliant and cruel is they play back the audio, because this guy like records tapes of things that are meaningful to him or something like that, he says. And you hear back this line from earlier in the movie where he says like, oh no, if you knew me, you would know I feel this big. And he like makes like an inch with his fingers. And when he made that line earlier in the movie, I don't know about you, like it's played like a joke and I laughed at that moment. And then to hear later in the film that like, no, it was his last cry for help from these people around him and no one caught it because they're all having fun, including me, the audience member. I was so struck at that level of just showing how empty it all is that even I, watching the film, could miss a cry for help in
and
there.
I think we get multiple cries for help in retrospect from him when he talks about his struggle of wanting to live this not materialistic philosophical life and then also wanting the security, especially for his family, of a more materialistic life. And then we eventually see his big fancy house, and that's where the crime scene is. It's in this big fancy house. There are all these, to me, everything just felt so gaudy in that context. There's this elaborate samovar, which is like a tea dispenser, if you don't know what that is, and all these material things surrounding him dead and his children dead. And so it's easy to see like he maybe realized to do it at home, specifically surrounded by that world that he so feared.
Yeah.
That materialistic side. I think we got several clues, and no, I did not catch them. Totally shocking twist in the story. I liked the choice when they do get to the wife. She's getting off a bus. They meet her at the bus stop, and we then see again just the shamelessness. It's almost worse than even taking pictures of the kids. And I think the police officer even says like, "Really? Do you have no shame?" or something like that, because they're just swarming this woman, and she says, she's like, "Oh my gosh, they're all taking pictures of me. Do you think I'm an actress?" It's like TMZ on steroids, just really awful. I liked the choice that we don't actually see the news given to her, because all she knows is that something has happened and they need to go. And the police officer even lies to her and says, your kids are okay, they're just hurt. it's such a smart choice because we've already seen the horrors of the actual act, and anything else, seeing a mother's grief, seeing a wife's grief, it's like we've already felt those feelings. And so it would have felt gratuitous to me to include her actual reaction. So I did really like that. But you're left with the dread of like, that it happened and that she's even given this false hope.
The film implicitly acknowledges throughout that we, the audience, are seeing this happen. And maybe not that we're voyeuristic about it, but it knows we're there. And so I think there is something there when we don't get to see her react because also the paparazzi get shut out.
You think this is going to be a reckoning. This is going to change him.
It does in some ways.
The hope is the hope is that it changes him for the better and makes him like what you want to happen. What would happen if he's a hero and if this had a happy ending is he would go through all of that, losing his friend, seeing the paparazzi hounding this woman and go, what work am I doing? I need to follow my friend's advice and follow my dreams. And he does the opposite. He becomes even worse as a result. We don't see any of this because it's a time jump into our last chapter. He's got gray in his hair and now he's just a publicist and isn't really writing anything other than puff pieces for his clients, essentially trying to advertise their talent and comparing them to other famous actors of the time like Paul Newman, which I thought was a funny name drop because apparently the studio pitched Paul Newman to play Marcello.
Oh,
and
there you go.
Fellini said, no, not that guy.
Is there a reason? Just didn't think he fit the part, or? Because, yeah, that's interesting. I'm picturing how that would work. And I love Paul Newman, so I'm biased.
Oh, me too. I
wish.
That would have been horrible because he's so likable as an actor.
Maybe that's what it was then, because, yeah, I don't, even in his scummiest roles, I could never hate Paul Newman.
It just says, well, this is because I read this on the IMDb trivia. After Fellini rejected the idea of Paul Newman for the lead role, Dino De Laurentiis suggested Gerard Philippe. He thought Marcello Mastroianni was too soft and goody-goody, a family man rather than the type who flings women onto the bed, which is so funny because I think Marcello Mastroianni does a great job. I think he plays scumbag very well in this. I haven't seen him in anything else.
Yeah, if I didn't realize Dino De Laurentiis was back producing this one. If he thought there was unnecessary stuff in Nights of Cabiria, I can't imagine him watching this film. It's like, cut it all. Cut everything.
Just do the opening and the closing, and that'll be good.
So it's an unknown amount of time later. You said there's a time jump. I kind of wish we knew more, but I guess it doesn't really matter, and it's intentionally vague.
And he's at this party again.
Yeah, well, I thought even the idea of the party was hilarious because they're like breaking into someone's house to throw a party. But I guess they're all friends, so it's fine. I mean, it's not fine, obviously, but like nothing's going to come of it. Yeah, I mean, it just gets worse and worse. It's devolving.
Yeah, it's a divorce party for a lady who just got divorced. And then she strips. There's also drag. I was like, oh, another performance. There's a lot of gay men at this party. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple that do a little dance in drag. And I thought that was cool. I do think that maybe is meant to show the kind of depravity that I was talking about earlier. But I don't think the way that he portrays gay people is not in a homophobic way, in my opinion. It's just like, this is not acceptable in society right now, which is accurate.
Yeah, I think it helped that we'd seen Eva Deloney, where like the character's gay and there's a lot of like that's not frowned upon in that movie at all.
Yeah, and it just immediately degrades. It's really awful to watch. He's super drunk. He's super mean. He tries to get an orgy started. He rides a woman like a horse and then like is really violent with her. Mm-hmm. Hits her a little bit and pulls her by her hair. And she is incredibly drunk and she throws up on herself. And then he opens up a pillow that's like a down pillow. He's like, I'm going to make you into a hen, and starts like sticking it on her sticky skin because she's thrown up on herself. It's awful. And you see this just total loss of any shred of decency or decorum is gone in him. He is a sloppy drunk man, embarrassing himself. They try to kick him out of the party unsuccessfully.
I was kind of shocked at how much it was, even if it's not like there's no single thing that's like graphic necessarily, but just the amount of things happening and like how it's presented. I was surprised for a film from 1960. I was like, imagine watching this at the time, just like you've never seen anything like this, you know.
And then it's daytime again. The sober light of day hits.
Something hits.
The after party wanders out to the beach. Fellini loves ending his movies on a beach or by a body of water. And there are these men dragging in a giant net that has a big old manta ray. They're like, it's a monster. It's crazy. It's really...
Give me a million guesses as to how this film was going to end, and I would not have gotten to they bring in the Loch Ness Monster.
Marcello makes a little comment about how even in death, they flip it over and it has these like very human-like and also shark-like eyes that are just kind of staring out, and he makes a comment about how even in death, it still feels like it's staring. Do you have any idea of what the ray represents, the monster?
I specifically did not look up what else anyone said about this because I wanted to interpret it here with you, but
yeah, me too.
Quite a moment. Clearly there's a metaphor. Like if there isn't, you know, I'd be very surprised. It's so shocking that this is happening and that like it's in this film. Yeah, I think to my best guess, it represents the audience if we are implicated as kind of sitting there and watching all this happen, and that being the film, but also being the world around us. I think the film condemns a lot of the progress, so to speak, of the time. At least the way it's happening, you know, with paparazzi and media flooding spaces they shouldn't be and relationships being more and more meaningless. So maybe that's like the bloated corpse of humanity staring out at what remains of the world. That's how I read it, but it's a wild moment.
I read it as a couple of things. I like that interpretation a lot, and I think that's probably closer than mine, potentially. But I think there's a good chance that it's him, that it's Marcello. I think the fact that they call it a monster, it's like this unrecognizable monster, and I do think he's kind of an unrecognizable monster by the end of this whole story. And they mention, it's been dead for a couple of days. It's like really bloated and kind of starting to rot. He's been dead inside for a while, so I can see that. And I also kind of like is not the right word, but I appreciate the parallel between the staring dead eyes of the manta ray and the staring dead eyes of Steiner. I think that's maybe why it affects Marcello, like why he's even making that comment, because it maybe even reminds him of that memory that he's clearly trying really hard to suppress with alcohol. It could be all those things. I mentioned earlier that the girl during the intermezzo singing a song called Patricia, and that it shows up later in the film. Where it shows up is that is the song that Nadia, the divorcee, requests if she's going to strip. And I really liked the, again, juxtaposition of this innocent girl who's, you know, working for a living and just like singing along. And then this older woman doing a striptease, an older woman who's freshly divorced doing a striptease for her friends to the same exact song at the end. It's this devolution of morality, I think.
Yeah, and once again, the corruptibility of art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then we have the Patricia nod again, and then he sees this girl on the sandbar, like far, there's a bunch of water in between them, and she's trying to talk to him, and we get this bookended moment of the beginning of the film. It's him trying unsuccessfully to talk to these hot ladies in bathing suits. And then at the end of the film, it's him being like, I can't hear you. You're trying to talk to me. She's like waving. She's trying to communicate like, hey, I remember you. And he doesn't hear her. And the final shot is her face. Thoughts? It's
her face. And then she gets closer and closer. And finally she glances at us with the last like 2 frames maybe of the film. And then yeah, it's over. Based on everything we've talked about from both of our readings, Marcello is unreachable at this point. Whether that's because he's literally a ghost or metaphorically a shell of his former self. I think it is just a nice narrative bookend. We've seen Fellini love to do that. And I think also in this final moment, I think she looks at us to really... It is not the same fourth wall break as Knights of Cabiria. I really want to emphasize that. Like, Knights is her thankful that we're there. Cabiria is glad we've gone on this journey with her, and
girl who is going to be okay.
And she wants that for the audience too. Paula looks at the audience and it feels dreadful. And I think that's, that we know that all of this horrible stuff has happened and she's looking at it and she doesn't know how horrible it is from where she is. To her, it still looks glamorous. And so I think when she looks to us, she asks, or the film asks the audience, all right, this girl has just grown up. This is the world she's inheriting. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to keep relationships as vapid as they are? Are we going to keep art as destructible as it seems to be becoming? Are we going to leave a world that is worse than we got it? Or are we going to try to make things better? And I think the way it's presented, I think Fellini does not necessarily think it's going to get better, this ending, but I think that is the question.
Really? Even though she gives such a sincere
If it was
smile.
a different character, I might read it different. But like, because she is a viewer looking at the glamour of the sweet life and doesn't know all that we know, I think when she smiles, it's naive.
Okay. I think I interpreted it very similarly, but a little more hopeful. It reminded me so much, weirdly enough, of the ending of One Battle After Another. Because you have this, older generation guy who's kind of a lost cause, very much a lost cause in Marcello's case. And then you have, the new generation. Like, all right, it's up to you now. And what are you going to do with like all the things you just said? But I love the parallel there between those two films, 65 years apart. And it's kind of the same message, which I'm sure, happens generationally every time. And maybe it's good that she has the innocence.
She isn't corrupted
to not know.
by it.
She isn't corrupted and she can have the chance to not make those same mistakes. And I don't think it's necessary for her to know.
You might be closer to what Fellini's saying than with that, because like I talked about earlier, there is that line that like, oh, why'd he do this? Maybe it's because he feared us. So maybe in her not knowing, that is better.
He felt like he had to say, to me, I interpret him, killing his children, Steiner, as an act of mercy in his mind. He's saving them from this world that we're leaving them. But it's like, no, they're the answer. I do think it's interesting. I wish we could get more psychology on where Fellini was at this point in his career. But when you think about, we talked about, especially in the trilogy of Loneliness, how it ends ultimately with hope. Same with Eva Delony. Even though it's this kind of tragic or uncertain end, ultimately, I think it is a message of hopefulness. And so I think it does fit well in what I know to be Fellini's beliefs, at least prior to this, based on his previous work, that it would be a more hopeful message. I don't think hope means, I think hope is, it's a wish. I think you can still be realistic, and I think he is very realistic with the state of Italian society throughout this, but I think to wish cast is a noble pursuit, and I do think that that's ultimately what he's doing with the fact that it ends on her face, smiling so genuinely.
I like that. And you're right, that would fit in better with what we know of him.
But if he's going through a crisis, as you said, I can totally see your point. Maybe this is the first time that he ends a movie and is like, no, there is no hope. Look at this dumb child. She doesn't know. She doesn't know what's going on.
We are to that point, and I've been anticipating your answer all episode. You've been hyping it up. Would you recommend the film?
That wasn't a joke. That wasn't a lie. I did not know how I was going to answer this, but after this discussion, I would recommend this film. I think Knights of Cabiria Till I Die. That's still going to be my top Fellini recommendation. Also because this is not nearly as accessible. Like, you got to want it. You got to want it if you're watching this. There are so many layers that I think it helps to be at least somewhat versed in Fellini and in Italian culture and politics of the time. Like, I think you need a lot more background to really fully appreciate this, but it's not absolutely necessary in order to, there's still an engaging story being told outside of all the commentary within. Yeah, it's not my strongest recommendation, but I think it's an impressive feat. such a big swing that really could have gone wrong. And I do think he pulls it off ultimately. And I like all the different motifs we've talked about with like night and day and depravity and piety and the hijacking of art. I love all of those kind of discussions being had here. So yes. Would you recommend the film?
You know yourself, listener. If you are not one to really want to wrestle with art, an intentionally exhausting film. I think that is key to mention. There are films that are 3 hours that rocket by. This is not one of them. It purposely puts you through the ringer to have you question all of these things. If you have people to talk about it with, I think it is so valuable. But if you're just going to zone out and call it, it's, nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I don't think it's going to appeal to you. But yeah, if you're willing to really dive in and sit with it and think about what it's asking, I think it's cool. And I think it is, once again, rewarded if you've done it in context, because you get to see, what Fellini is heading toward. And I have seen 8.5, so I can see how this is a transition point between Nights of Caviria and 8.5.
More than anything, I love that I absolutely know nothing about it because it's called 8.5, only because it's his 8.5 film.
Yeah.
How do you even 8.5th film?
But yeah, I mean, if you're into cinematography, just stop what you're doing, pause the episode and watch it. And then if you're into art that you can really wrestle with, pick a Saturday morning and sit down with it. Spend as much time
and
thinking about
your day. Pick a Saturday morning in the dead of winter so that it's 4 p.m. when it gets dark and you can feel the way these characters do. Go and get really drunk and ride a lady like a horse.
Well, that is our gargantuan show this week. We didn't quite make the film's runtime, but this is long for us. Feel free, if you agree, disagree, have other interpretations, hit us up.
What's that manta ray about?
retrospectivecinema@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at retro_sin, CIN. I think something is coming out this week, so maybe you'll see me there. But if not, Project Hail Mary continues to be the hit of the year thus far, so go see my thoughts on that. Otherwise, I have a letterboxed at Ryan Loves Film.
As do I, at Annie Morell. And next week, as I mentioned, we are heading into the big one, the one he is most known for.
Well,
8.5.
Whether you're wrestling with La Dolce Vita, watching 8.5, seeing something in theaters, sweet watching.
I don't like it, but it's on theme.
You just be happy about your watching. It's okay.